Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we've got a top 16 breakdown for the Carta Magica in-person Montreal regionals that happened this past weekend. They had the full 512 players, 9 rounds of Swiss into this top 16, and I'm really looking forward to going into it. So real quick though, before we get started, if you guys are new to the channel, we do make a lot of content for the One Piece card game, so make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And then also there have been a bunch of events this weekend. We're doing our best to catch up to all the data for it. You can check out my website, events, for all the deck lists from this event and many others. And again, we're going to keep this as up to date as we can for this one too. So jumping on into this one again, so this was past weekend, 512, 9 rounds, and of the top 16 we did have 4 copies of Shanks, 3 Doflamingos, 2 Teach, 2 Usopp, and then singles of Moria, the purple and black Luffy, Rob Lucci, Betty, and Boa Hancock. So generally speaking, I think that these 3 have been generally the strongest decks in the game, in Shanks, Dofi, and Teach. Usopp's been mildly, I think, important in this current meta. And then honestly, 5 leaders that generally I wasn't expecting most of these to top, right? We've seen Rob Lucci do a little bit of work. I've seen a little people talk about Boa being very strong, but Gecko I think is a surprise top 16 in Phoenix. The Betty is a little bit of a surprise in this format compared to OP10, and then the purple and black Luffy is a complete surprise for me as well, and definitely one that wasn't on my radar. So I think that's really cool and interesting, and I'm looking forward to going over those deck lists with you guys. And then also we do have the leader breakdown too, so shout outs to Carta Magica, as well as I'm Chippy for helping me with this. So 107 Shanks, 64 of purple Luffy, which again, no purple Luffy in the top 16 despite it being the second most popular leader, I think is really impactful. We also have the Teach, we have Dofi, and then 25 Lim, 23 Zoro, 22 Bonnie, and 20 Usopp. So generally speaking too, like purple Luffy wasn't in top 16, Lim wasn't in top 16, Zoro, Bonnie, I think those are some really interesting numbers for how this is. Also for the 5 individual leaders that top this one, they were at 5 or less copies per leader in the entire event too. So to see such unique leaders get consistent tops like this, I think is really interesting, and just kind of shows how open this format still is. We're like a month deep into it at this point, but there are still just single leaders getting their first tops into this late April event too, which I think is cool. So we are going to go over the top placing list for each one of these leaders as well, and then again, if you guys want to see any of them, they are all on my website, Eggman Events, linked in the description, and let's just jump on into it. So starting off, we do have the first place. So we got 707's version of Donquixote Doflamingo, and this has been, I think, pretty prevalent in this meta since release in OP, or as in like in this meta's release, it's been still viable, right? There was some talk of Jinbei leaving would make this deck like not work or not viable, but spoilers, it was a Dofi versus Dofi finals, right? So it is final round for it. So we also do have the Choas version of the deck here too, which we do see some similarities, but the fact that these were the 2 final undefeated decks into round 9, I think Doflamingo is still very prevalent in this format. So one big thing that I think both these players are running that I don't know if they know each other or the history with it either, but they're both playing these 1-drop Trafalgar Laws. These are cards that generally I don't see as much play for Doflamingo. I think that Boa Hancock plays this a little bit more often in their version of like 7 Warlords and stuff, but this is a interesting ad for what this deck wants to do. It is a very flexible ad, right? The fact that it is just a 1-drop, so if we need to play another body out to play something with Trafalgar Law, it's good. That could say 7 Warlord with 7 Son Goku is a great effect too, and I think in general it just means like your opponent has to deal with it. And for this meta in general, I feel like removing bodies is a little bit more expensive than it used to be, especially like Gecko Moria gone and how some decks work. This 1-drop blocker in this deck, and I think many others in this format, can just get a lot of value right now. So I think it's an interesting ad. I think it gets a lot of value here, and your opponent has to really make some decisions like how big do I need to swing anymore, or do I have to like spend a lot of Dawn just to get rid of a 1-drop blocker? I think this is a really good like sink of value for it, where for 1 Dawn your opponent usually has to spend a little bit more than 1 Dawn to get rid of it, and I think that helps out a lot, especially in a deck that already has like a lot of cycle and card draw and ways to get like card advantage. Using this to get like a little bit of an energy or a Dawn advantage I think is good. So other than that, I think most people kind of know what Doflamingo looks like a little bit. I will also say for Chow's version of it that we all are also playing the 7-drop Dofi. I do like this card in this meta. Most people play like 1 or 2 copies if they do play the card. But again, this is a 7 Warlords of the Sea, so it is searchable off Sengoku because it doesn't care about the cost of any of the cards that it searches either. And I think that's something that really is good for this deck, to be able to get rid of some other bodies. And then in the mirror match too, if you play it out, the only way people can get rid of it is with Red Rock. Jozu doesn't hit it, and the fact that you can hit their pretty impactful cards too, I think is strong as well. So not much more to say, but congratulations to both of our Dofis in the top 4, 707 for winning, and Chows for their top 4 finish. Next up, we've got Shanks, and we've got 3 X1 versions of the deck that I want to go over, and mostly just to kind of show off how diverse Shanks is in deck building right now. So we have Nick F's version, we have Sue's version, as well as Kyo's version as well. And you'll see that we do have like a strong baseline of like our top end, right? Most decks are playing the Ben Beckman, the Silver's Rayleigh, the Monkey D. Dragon, as well as the 10-drop Shanks, right? I think those are some pretty common ads for most versions of these decks right now. Most people are playing 1 copy of Goldie Roger, right? I think this is still like a solid card in its own right. The fact that it can just win you the game, the fact that it exists in the deck means your opponent has to play a little bit differently. And if your opponent goes down to 0 and you have a board, you can just this just says you win the game in a lot of ways. So I think that's very strong for the deck. Running at 1 copy makes I think perfect sense for this meta too right now. And then we just kind of have like the different builds of how we can play Shanks, and there's more that exists, to be honest, but generally speaking, there's just a lot of it depends on what you want to do before you get to your 7 Dawn plays, 8 Dawn plays. How do you want to get there, right? So for next version of it, we're playing more of the Straw Hat build. We can kind of identify that by playing the 1-drop Nami searcher for it. So this is really good for finding like the Sanji as well as the Tony Chopper, and then kind of on the mid to late end, the Lucky Roo and Monkey.D.Luffy. All these cards are very good. You have more rush than general in this deck, which means you have more ways to interact with board early. It means that your opponent's going to try to fight for your board a little bit more, and that either means that you get a board into the late game, or you have a lot of cards in your life to make it so that you can greedily play like a 10-drop and you don't get super punished for it. So I think that's definitely one way to approach this deck. And then also we do have access to a good amount of events with the Bad Manners Kick Course, the Gum Gum Fire Fist Pistol Red Hawk, as well as the Gum Gum Mole Gun. This card I think is a little bit more controversial in the deck. A lot of people are, this card is not as popular, but it does do a lot of work for removal. So I understand like why it's tempting, especially when it is searchable off the Nami. Then for the next build from Sui, we do have more of the red hair package, and again you can identify that with the Uta being able to search with that. So we are playing a little bit more of the I would say like mid red hair pirates cards to help facilitate this draw. So that kind of means to me like Usopp, which is not a bad card, but definitely not an auto include in this deck right now, and so some people aren't playing it. So I think that's an identification there. We are also playing 2 copies of the 10-cost Shanks from OP6 to help us get there, as well as the Divine Departure, which I don't hate this card in the deck, right? I do think there's some ways where it gets a lot of value and can help you either get defense or removal aggressively, and I think it's a fine card, especially if you are already playing the Uta blocker, or sorry, the Uta searcher. And then we're also playing the Zora, which I don't see this card as much in the deck, especially I think like the 5-drop Luffy is a little bit more popular, but I do think like the fact that this can play some great bodies off your hand, right? We have Sanji, we have Tony Chopper, we have Lucky Roo. There's also some situations too where if you are pretty confident they won't remove it afterwards, you can play Hongo, which then you can use that to get some removal in the mid to late game, especially like if you're at like 5 Dawn or 6 Dawn, you play Zoro, you have it out there, then your opponent has to like remove it, then you can play Hongo and then have like a really good like Ben Backman or Silver's Rayleigh play, and with that, which I think is good. So generally speaking, I think this is an interesting build with the Zoro, but I think it makes sense for what it is. And then for our last build for Shanks, we do have Quo's version, and this is like the I'd say like the Red Hawk, full version of it, right? We aren't playing any searchers. We do have, we don't have a lot of early consistency pieces, but we do have ways to just be a little bit more controlling. I know a lot of people who play this card, the counter effect is just fine, but the trigger effect is what really sells it. The fact that this is kind of like a beige in life for this color is really strong. And then you also just have some times where it's pretty easy to keep 2 Dawn open, specifically since some of your strongest cards are like 8 costs. So silvers are Monkey.D. Dragon. It's very easy to play those for 8. Get some pressure, then still have the 2 Dawn open for Red Hawk, which is good. Compared to something like Grad Beam or Divine Departure, it's difficult to have both of these. You know, more than one activate on defense side. You have to spend a lot of Dawn to keep that active, but I do think the deck is still in a really good spot, and it's really cool to see just how many different builds for Shanks exist. I really do think it's just a personal preference. I don't think one's way better than the other, and it's just what you kind of want to target a little bit more, and you know, just what your early gameplay, what you want that to look like. So again, congratulations to all of our Shanks players for their X1 top 16 finishes. Next up, we've got Gecko Moria. So this is Vandiil's version of the deck here, and this is definitely, you know, one of the leaders that I'm very surprised was able to get a top 16 finish in this format. You know, on the surface, right, it makes a lot of sense why this leader is not as favorable right now, right? We have a boss monster, which was 8-drop Gecko Moria, which got banned, right? Like the boss monster that was made for this deck is no longer in the game, right? So in my mind, I'm like, why would I play this deck if that was the case? But if I was kind of, you know, after seeing this top, right, these are not new thoughts from like, oh, before the event top. This is me reevaluating after top. Like, why would this be a good spot for this meta? And one thing I would say is that like it is great still at putting a lot of bodies on board, right? The fact that our leader can play bodies out for trash and still have like a 6k attack, right? Like we're still actively getting card draw our value from it, which is just good value for this meta right now. Ryuma is a new card from OP10 as well. So Dawn ×1, this character gains double attack, which this is a pretty rare keyword in this game, but also the fact that it's very, you know, it's a 4-drop 6k, it's sometimes hard to interact, and then just puts pressure on your opponent every turn, I think, moving forward, which is pretty unique from this card, which we haven't really seen before. And then if I was being honest, like, do we miss 8-drop Moria in this deck, right? Is that a card that we miss in this deck? And I honestly don't think we do that much, especially like compared to something like Lucci. I think like Gecko Moria was kind of in this weird spot where most other, like, there's so many other leaders that just took advantage of that card way better than itself, right? So even though it was like the boss monster for this, it is a card that I think was less necessary for how this deck functions. I do think like Rebecca is a very broken card still, and so because of that, we're able to take advantage of that with the Gecko Moria. Just means you can play Rebecca Hina still, right? The fact that you can use that to get something -4, which means that your Absalom will be able to get rid of a 6 or less. I think that's very good for us. Tempest Kick is very easy to use in this deck still. Honestly, I think that there's a chance to say that like Tempest Kick is easier to play in Gecko Moria than Lucci in some periods, because we do mill a little bit more at times, and we don't need to put as many cards back from our trash to our bottom of our deck in the mid game, outside of like maybe use like an Absalom effect. Generally speaking, we don't play the Hog back unless we have to early game. Perona is usually the one we want to play, and Ryuma as well, which don't put any cards back to the bottom of our deck. So, and even if not, like there's just times where we can say, you know what, Sindri, put 5 into our trash, then we can Tempest Kick afterwards. We recur the value of that Sindri, and then we're able to get that extra advantage. So all that aside, I think that there's some really, really good combos, right? Our late game of Sakazuki and Kaido is very good. The fact that Kaido, again, is a activate main to get around the effects from like Teach, I think is very good. There is like an issue where we don't have like any way to get some additional minus outside of Tempest Kick, so it's a little bit trickier for us to remove cards compared to Lucci, since Lucci and Kaido with no additional Dawn lets you get rid of an 8 or less instead of a 7 or less, which can make a difference sometimes. But by and large, I think this is a really cool build. I'm happy to see another leader just get a top that I wasn't expecting, and congratulations to Vandiil for their top with Gecko Moria. The next up, you've got Marshall.D.Teach. You know, this has been a pretty understood leader into this format with mostly understood deck builds. I'd say that there's 2 minor differences in 2 different builds that exist right now. We have, like, I'd say the more traditional, which plays almost 50 of the Blackbeard Pirates. I think the big card that we don't, you know, like Finger Pistol's like the one card, right? This is the one card that we play 4 copies of. It's not a Blackbeard Pirates, but it just has such good and efficient removal that it's worth it. The trigger effect is insane. The fact that it just also puts cards into our trash to make our Burgesses stronger. All of these things are good, right? These are just great things for this deck, and this is just this should pretty much be a Blackbeard Pirates card at this time, right? But the fact that it's not searchable, I think, is helpful for some balancing for this deck. If you could search Finger Pistol, right, like this deck would be so much better, and it's already very, very, very good. So But this is more of, I'd say, like the casino build, the trigger luck build. And the reason I say that is because we are also playing the I bid 500 million. This does have like some niche applications in like the mirror match where you can get rid of the opponent's Jesus Burgess because it doesn't KO, it just returns to hand. But being able to get rid of a 6 or less with a trigger is pretty absurd in this game, right? This does let you get a lot of good interaction. And then worst case, if you do draw this card, you can just discard it off your leader effect or off your stage. And that's kind of the idea for how this works. So we do have like less room for tech cards outside of that because this deck is very very understood for ratios for most of the cards. So we do have to go like a little bit lesser on some ratios on, like, we're only playing 2 copies of Doc Q, 2 copies of Von Augur. We kind of have to play 4 copies of 5-drop Kuzan. We are also playing 4 copies of the 3-drop Shiryu. So this does also just offer a lot of removal. And since we aren't playing the Liberation, that does mean that we do get, we can go wider on the board and we don't get punished for it either. And I don't have much more to say for Blackbeard. So generally, still very good in this format. You definitely you need to know how to play against it and what's your game plan. And 10-drop is still such a great card in this format too. So this is the build here from Tibbers, and congratulations for their finish with Teach. The next up, we've got purple and black Luffy from OP10, and this is the build here from GoolHazard. And sincerely, when I got the data, I had to double check, like, are you sure that this is a deck that topped, right? I wanted to make sure that this was the correct build, the correct leader and stuff, because this is a leader that I think many people wrote off, including myself. This was a leader that wasn't on my tier list. This is a leader that I didn't think was going to do well, right? In OP09, on the debut of this leader, it didn't do super great, right? We got like a couple tops in top 16 at the beginning weeks, and then it didn't do anything. This deck lost Gecko Moria, which I think was a card that we try to take advantage. But stepping back from that, I will say that this leader is really unique. I think Purple Luffy from OP05 definitely gets a lot of the spotlight, but it's insane to me that this leader got a top 16 finish, but the OP05 Purple Luffy didn't. So this is one I haven't experimented with the OP10 meta, right? This also didn't really get any cards from OP10, right? If you look at these are all pretty much cards from OP09 or earlier. We are playing like a good amount of top end, right? So you can see like this is like similar to how the Purple Luffy works too, but this is just, again, like a really interesting build for everything, right? If you don't know what this leader does, I don't blame you, but so Dawn ×1, all your characters gain +1 cost. Then your turn, once per turn, when 2 or more Dawn cards in your field, you return to your Dawn deck up to 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active, and then 1 additional and rested. So it means that if you go Dawn -2 on anything, you're able to recur the cost, right? So that means like cards like the Gum Gum Lightning, you get to play for 2. You get your Dawn back, you get rid of a 6k, which is great. We also do have Giant, but this is on your opponent's turn, so you don't get the Dawn back. If you could get the Dawn back from the Giant with this card, this would be broken, right? This would be very, very good. That would probably make it viable all by itself. But without that, you do still lose the Dawn. But generally speaking, the game plan that I can see from this build specifically is that we play like a bit of a like obnoxious mid game. We do get like a lot of interaction. We get a lot of removal with, again, the Lightning and the Gamma Knife, both cards that are also searchable off the 1-drop law. And then we just try to play the 10-drop Luffy as soon as possible. So this has been like a pretty good, a pretty... How would I say? What's the best way to say this, right? This is a fun 10-drop Secret, right? The fact that it does let you get another turn, right? The effect is powerful, but also has a lot of negatives for you. But it has less negatives specifically in this deck because of how our leader effect works. So in case you guys don't know, if you do the Dawn -10, you use the leader effect, and then you have one. You still get your turn once per turn because you returned more than 2 Dawn. Then you have 1 Dawn rested, 1 Dawn active. You use your effect from your Monkey.D.Luffy to get 1 active. So you end the turn on 3, and then you start your next turn, you're at 5 Dawn, and then you use your Luffy's effect again to go up to 6 Dawn with this, for 1. So generally speaking, it's like a Dawn -4. So the fact that this is just kind of like a Kaido in this deck is great, right? Like Kaido also is like a Dawn -3 in this deck because we get 1 back and 1, we get 2 Dawn back after Dawn -5. So all of that's just really good. And the fact that we can do Kaido in this deck is kind of unheard of, I would say, in specific. So because of that, I think like this Luffy is very good in this deck in particular. I think it's a mildly good game plan to just say, you know what, let's just say that we want to try to play this once per game at least. The fact that it lets us do like a 6k attack into a 12k attack and like 9k attack afterwards is great. And if your opponent's not expecting, the 10-drop Luffy to come down, there's a lot of decks that just are expecting like one blocker to do the job, and it doesn't always do that. So all in all, I think that's a mildly good way to play. I do think like 8-drop Gecko Moria in this deck was really tempting, but we didn't get we got like value, right? Our best play was like, oh, we played 1-drop Law and 4-drop Frankie, right? Which means we do get like a lot of draw and cycle, but we're not really doing anything. We don't have like a lot of ways to get removal on the other side, and all in all, I think that's something that's impactful for what this deck wants to do. So I don't have much more to say about this right now. I think this is a really cool finish. I definitely want to do some of my own testing with it. And congratulations to GoolHazard with their finish there. Next up, we've got the Rob Lucci. So this is Freezy's version of the deck here. And Rob Lucci's been doing, I think, pretty well in this format. It did also win the Germany event that happened this past weekend, which we should be getting on the site pretty soon as well. But this is a tried and true leader, right? It's approaching its 1-year anniversary since OP10 released last summer, and this is just a leader that I think is going to be relevant pretty consistently just because of how good the leader effect is, right? When attacking, to put cards into your trash and get the cost reduction by 1, it's very hard to make this like a mediocre effect, I think, right? These are generally both things that Black wants to do. Most leaders do one or the other individually, so the fact that you get to do both on a 5-life leader is just still very, very strong. So with Gecko Moria being removed, as we've mentioned several times in this video already, we do have to find some ways to still get value from this deck. Rebecca is still, again, mentioned, very, very good. The fact that we can use Hina, but in this deck specifically, we also have Spandine that we can get from this. So from a card with, from 0 cards on board, we can go Rebecca, Spandine into Rob Lucci. We generate 3 bodies, which is still absurd. The fact that also Rob Lucci can get some removal, and all for 4 energy is, or 4 Dawn, it's just crazy. It's just crazy how much value you get from something like that still. And, Gecko Moria Rebecca was still very broken in this deck in particular, but Rebecca Spandine is still very, very strong for what it is. So some other things that I mentioned or noticed from this too is that we do run a lot more of like the reduction from like Uta, which I think this is a great add in this deck. If I was to play this deck right now, I'd definitely be playing a couple copies of Uta. I think it's very strong. Are also playing Laboon, being able to just get some consistent reduction, I think, is great too. -4, since we don't have Ice Age anymore, right, we do have to find some ways to be more creative with how we get things into range for a Rob Lucci, so I think Laboon helps that a lot. We are also playing some additional like Tempest Kick, 2 copies of Finger Pistol, which I think this is like a little bit less good in this deck because it is a little bit, something we almost always want to play something on board every turn, right? We're definitely more of like a tempo deck, and we want to be able to build a board while getting rid of our opponent. So Finger Pistol does do one of those things, but not both. We are also not playing the 1-drop Spandam Searcher too. So without that, like Finger Pistol, I feel is like a little bit worse because it's not as consistently found. For a medium end, we do see Sabo, which I don't see this card as often, but I do think if I was playing any Black deck right now, I'd probably play this at 1 to 2 copies still. I think it's just too good of an effect and just very good for helping us get some more cycle into our deck too, especially since Rebecca can find Sabo and then play Sabo. That's still just such a good combo, and still stymies a lot of other decks a lot of the time. We have Tashigi too, which in case you don't know, yes, it doesn't get the Smoker leader effect of giving something -4 cost on play, but the activate main once per turn to be able to trash up to a card with a cost of 0. The fact that this works in against Teach, the fact that also like if they have like a Burgess, you can go leader effect, Tempest Kick, and then play Tashigi and you get rid of the Teach because it's an activate main effect, and also it doesn't KO it trashes it. That's very good. Same kind of thing for like Brook too. This does trash something it isn't on play, and it's a little bit more expensive without any counter, but the fact that this still can do the same thing is, I think, impactful too. So anyways, I think that these are some like really good cards. Jack I haven't been seeing as much for Rob Lucci, but it's not a terrible card in the deck either because it does get some good removal consistently. And then I think most people are on Kaido at the top end for this deck. Again, we've mentioned it previously, but the removal aspect from it's very good. The fact that you can interact with Teach with this card just means I think like Rob Lucci has weirdly had a better matchup into Teach because we don't have to play Gecko Moria, which was such a brick in that matchup in particular. So I think Lucci's in a good spot. I'm happy to see it still getting some tops, and congratulations to Freezy for their finish with it there. The next up we've got Betty, and this has been a theorized deck I think in this meta for quite a bit. It's been seeing a lot of value in OP11 right now because it does have a good matchup into the blue and purple Luffy because we're just so aggressive, and 3 life is not a lot against a deck that just puts out so much pressure, and in conjunction with Karasu, which kind of negates the effect of like a 6k leader, right? The fact that you make them a 5k the way that you make them, now they have to respect most attacks that you have every time, and when you only have 3 life, that does add up very, very quickly. So I don't have like a lot to say about this deck, to be honest. Most decks pretty much look like this, right? We got like the first wave of support in OP05 for like the red side, and then with the OP09 stuff, we got all this new yellow stuff. That just worked really well with the deck. Honestly, it works really great for Betty, and so because of all that, they work really well together. Only this leader can really take advantage of all that, and it's just in a very, very good spot. So I don't have much more to say. I will say like Inazuma is like one of the cards I don't see as often in this deck, but being able to play off the trigger is great. The fact that you also can get some like weird reduction removal, not removal, but like interaction with blockers or something on the early game can help you, right? Like if you're playing against like the Doflamingo, the fact that this one attacking can happen and like rest like a 2-drop Teach, and then you can get rid of that, I think is strong and can slow down your opponent sometimes or something like that. And the top end dragon, and I don't see like the stage as often. I don't think this is an auto include, but this does help you find your pieces a little bit more easy in the mid to late game. And then also the tension hormone. Most people I don't think play this, but the fact that you are able to play this, let's say like you are going first, I think generally speaking you might want to go second, but if you have to go first, you have 3 Dawn open, you can just use this. You can use it to play out like a Revolution Army for free afterwards, and then like you can have it like be Emporio or Karasu, and then you get to kind of steamroll from that. The only issue with that is that I think like a lot of people will respect that they don't want to attack Betty early game, because you can just give them a lot of tempo for doing so, right? Like half of our deck have these on-play triggers because of it. So you generally want to be like a little bit more passive, I think, in the early game, and then afterwards you can take advantage of getting another body on board that maybe your opponent wasn't expecting. So I don't have much more to say. Congratulations to Daveed with their finish with Betty. Next up, we've got Boa, and this has been. I know a couple people in this format, like at the beginning of OP10, they're like, this leader's broken. That's going to be very good. It's going to be really relevant, and I didn't really see that happen. I've seen it, Boa pop up every once in a while, and I do think that the deck is really strong. But it's a very interesting deck, I think, in this format right now, right? If you don't know, Boa's effect is this effect can be activated when a character is removed from the field by your effect, either person's field. If you have 5 or less cards in your hand, you get to draw 1, right? So where Doflamingo is like a little bit more aggressive and tempo based, this one's more like just advantage and reverse tempo based, right? The idea that we can slow down your opponent a lot of the time, the fact that we can get some bigger bodies on our board, right? We get to the late game a little bit more successfully. I think those are all kind of hallmarks for how Boa works, especially in contrast to how Doflamingo works for it. So you kind of help achieve that, right? We do have copies of like the Mule. It's just a blocker that also lets us draw 2, draw 2 and bottom deck or top deck 2, which I think is great. Boa kind of has like this weird thing where we want to try to always be at a low hand size, so we get like our leader effect. And what that kind of ends up with in a lot of times is that at the end of the game, Boa will still have like 4 or 5 cards in hand, but none of them will have counter because you've already used all your counter cards. So Namule helping to filter that, I think, is great for this deck. Kaya does the same thing, and you can bounce it back to your hand with either Trafalgar Law or Jozu, both cards that Dofis plays that we can also play as well. We also have like 6-drop Boa, being able to get some stuns, and also we can bottom deck like a 1-drop we don't need anymore on either side of the board. We have Kiros as well, being able to get some great value. This is probably like one of the biggest busts for this deck. The fact that we have the 7-drop 9k that can bounce a 5 or less just means like we can like draw a card, get some removal, even like bounce back like a Sengoku or Kaya and then get the draw afterwards is great. Sanji is an interesting ad that I don't see as often, but we can set it up with like a buggy to be able to find like either a Kiros, Boa, or Jozu. And if we play buggy, we can bounce it back to hand with Jozu too, which I think is great value. And then 10-drop Kaido. I think most people are playing this version of 10-drop Kaido compared to the secret rare just because we do get like chances of like double removal and a draw a lot of the time. And I think against most decks that are more aggressive leaning, like this hits the board and then just kind of stays there for the rest of the game, which is very strong. So other than that, we do have like some removal events, right? 3000 Worlds, Gungreen Red Rock, and Raging Tiger. I think all those make kind of sense. And yeah, this is, a very, I think, particular deck on how it works. The ratios obviously are very personalized too, with the, like one pudding, the Luffy, which we haven't talked about this card, but trash 2 cards from your hand, your opponent chooses a character they own and place it at the bottom of your deck. This can work in your favor a lot. I think the fact that, like, again, like you're going to have like too many cards in hand sometimes, and they're just going to be cards that are going to be stuck there. So this being able to remove anything in the game if your opponent only has the one card out there, I think is fantastic. It gets a lot of value. So especially since you can do something like, Gravity Blade something, or, if your opponent has like 2 or 3 bodies, you can get rid of the smaller bodies, I think, relatively easily, and then play the Luffy. And then this, turns into like a trash 1, draw, like trash 2, draw 1 with leader effect, which I think is good value too. So anyways, I don't have much more to say. It's been cool to see Boa top in this event, and we'll have to see if it gets any more finishes in the next couple weeks. And then lastly, we've got Usopp. So we've got 2 builds, and they are the exact same build. It's Gem and Andy's versions of Usopp. We've been seeing this leader do, I think, pretty consistently top for most events in the last 2 weeks or so. There's been 2 builds. There's been more of like the Sakazuki build, which hasn't really made any progress, I think, in the North American side of the English One Piece meta right now. But I think this leader is very good. This is, I'd say, the more standard Dressrosa build, right? The idea is that we do have to play like 7-drop Rebecca on curve. We get a lot of advantage from playing this out. And I think part of the reason that Usopp is still relevant right now is because I think Doflamingo is really relevant, right? It did win the event and, was both undefeated into finals. So that's definitely one of the better matchups for Usopp right now. And so that being around, I think, helps the deck out a lot too. We do have like some consistency issues, not with how much like cycle we have, but like the fact that we have to find so many specific pieces on time. And if we don't, we get really punished for it, right? Like we need to establish the Coliseum usually as soon as possible. We want to, on 7, be able to play Rebecca with like a Kyros, our 7-drop Luffy, and then like a 4-drop of either Zora or Cavendish. Like all that's just very specific card search wise, which again, we do have a lot of search for it, but we don't always consistently see it when we do want to. So I think this deck is fun. I think this has been one of my favorite leaders to experiment in this format. And again, I don't have as much to say because this is a very, I think, established build for this format, but it's very good. Congratulations to Gem and Andy for their finishes there. And that's going to be it for this one. Again, if you guys want to see any of the deck lists from this event or many others, you can find them on my website, Eggman Events. And I'm looking forward to seeing the other events that we had from this weekend too. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.